Sexual harassment in the halls of the Texas state capitol.
Ranging from suggestive glances or comments, offhand comments, to actual sexual assault.
Now, a push to change the culture.
I think we're at a tipping point in that women are coming forward and saying enough.
Good morning and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. Governor Gov Abbott plans to work with lawmakers to improve policies to report and prevent sexual harassment in the state capitol. This comes after several reports describe an environment where young staffers are harassed and even assaulted at the hands of male lawmakers. KXAN's political reporter Phil Prazen spoke to one representative who wants change.
When staff working with State Representative Linda Koop told her they didn't know where to go to report sexual harassment, she said that needed to change.
Some of them are going to school, going to college here. Some are as young as 18 years old. It's a really important thing, especially those of us who are parents.
She sent this letter to Governor Abbott asking him to help set a protocol. Koop wants victims to be able to report to someone who's not a lawmaker and to rid the state of elected officials policing themselves on this issue.
I was a little bit surprised here that even though people would say their protocols, they didn't know what the guidelines were.
Koop sent the letter after reading the Texas Tribune. There, Jolie McCullough was one of a team of reporters who dug into the issue.
Ranging from suggestive glances or comments, offhand comments, to actual sexual assault. And this goes back years and decades even.
What surprised her was they couldn't find any evidence that someone filed a formal sexual harassment complaint ever.
I think it really demonstrates that this is a pervasive problem at the Texas Capitol and one that isn't being dealt with properly.
Representative Koop hopes a new policy will be set by next session in January 2019. Phil Prazen, KXAN News.
Lawmakers in both chambers on Tuesday said they would look at how to improve the process for reporting sexual harassment at the Capitol. Senator Lois Kolkhorst of Brenham is in charge of reviewing the policies in the Senate. House Speaker Joe Straus ordered his chamber's administration committee to review its sexual harassment policy and implement training programs by the end of January. A famous former lawmaker is sharing her own story of sexual harassment by a fellow legislator. Wendy Davis spoke to us about her experience and how she fought back.
You know, like a lot of women in the Texas Capitol, I had my own experience with a sexual harassment encounter where I was inappropriately touched by a newly sworn-in House member at a social event. I don't believe he knew that I was a senator at the time, and there's obviously no excuse regardless of who the person is. But, you know, because I was a senator, I had a way of holding him to account for that. For the next 2 legislative sessions, he didn't get a bill through because I had friends in the House who made sure that that happened. And so it was good to have the ability to hold someone responsible for behaving in that way. But unfortunately in the Texas Capitol, for so many women that work there is no way to hold people to account who are doing such things.
Davis did not name the House member. We asked her to explain why she and many other women working at the Capitol have found it difficult to report cases of sexual harassment.
Part of the problem really is there's no one to report to. And I know that in response to the article that was in the Texas Tribune this week, there's been conversation in the Texas House and Senate about what to do about that. Purportedly, there's a system in place already in the Texas Senate for training and awareness. I have to tell you, I have no idea what they're talking about. I was a senator there for 6 years and I never heard of such a thing. So maybe it's the case that brand new elected officials are going through that and brand new employees are going through that. What about all the people who have been working there for years and years and years? Whatever it is, it's not working. And I think there needs to be a much broader system of prevention, of having conversations about what harassment looks like, what are inappropriate comments, particularly from folks from a different generation who may feel like it's okay to say some of the things or do some of the things they've been doing. It's not okay.
Joining us now for some perspective, we have Morgan Smith from the Texas Tribune and R.G. Ratcliffe, the politics editor with Texas Monthly. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It's been an interesting week as all of these allegations and conversations have really spilled over into Texas politics. We've been hearing about it on a national stage, and it started with the Daily Beast article, and then both of your publications have really talked a lot about it this week. Why do you think it's just now coming up in Texas? Why hasn't it been a conversation earlier?
I think it has been a conversation earlier. It's just one that's been happening a lot more quietly and kind of out of the public eye, because I think that women are only just now feeling like people might listen to them if they come forward.
Mm-hmm. I know you had so much historical perspective in the article that you wrote, going back to the Ann Richards days.
Right.
What, like she said, people just didn't talk about it so openly. But I just thought some of the things that you wrote about were so interesting.
There was actually a period there where there was quite a bit of discussion about it. It kind of focused on a male member who would take women's hands and kiss them on the cheek, but it really came to a head because he got into popping bra straps, and which seems kind of ridiculous. And some of the women legislators actually bought an inflatable sex doll and put it in his office with a poem on it that was that if he needed to squeeze someone's hand, he could do it with the sex doll. And State Representative Deborah Danberg was one of the women who did that, and she told me that they had to do a lot of educating for a lot of the male legislators, because she carried a bill that up to that time it was legal for a man to rape his wife, and she carried a bill to outlaw spousal rape. And when she first brought it up in committee, one of the men in the room said, well, if I can't rape my wife, who can I rape? And she said, then they had to kind of get across the idea of consensual and non-consensual sex. So there was a pretty big jump in there, and it may have been highlighted during that era by the fact that Ann Richards had won the governor's office, and so people were more willing to talk about it. And then we went into like a 20-year lull of secret whispers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quarter century later, and we're hearing about this list that many women have been using for a number of years to talk about the stories that had happened to them. You guys interviewed a lot of different people. Many people don't want to use their name.
Yeah, I had one person describe it to me as, you can make a complaint, you can talk publicly about this, or you can have a career. The Capitol is a world where everything is built on relationships and loyalty and the trade of information, trade of favors. It's not an environment where, women have felt, in particular, that speaking up about this kind of thing is something that is not going to come with retaliation. So, the Tribune spoke to more than 24 staffers and lawmakers, current and former, about their experiences, and we did kind of learn about the ways in which women have kind of tried to warn each other, like don't find yourself alone with this person, don't sit next to this person at political events. And then there's also a list that was started in 2016 for women, particularly in progressive circles, that basically is a list of names and shared experiences about encounters that women had with the men on that list.
Mm-hmm. And the leadership has really responded to this. It's clear that so many people have pointed out that there aren't good policies when it comes to reporting in the House or the Senate or in the Capitol in general. I know Lois Kolkhorst is going to be heading up a group. What do you expect to come out of that?
That's a tough question, because one of the fundamental problems is how do you discipline an elected member of the legislature? And and they set the tone. For their staffs and everyone else. And one of the better examples is State Senator Boris Miles out of Houston, who, forcibly kissed a woman in public against her will. He was charged with brandishing a gun, And he's been elected 3 times since then, when the least vote he ever got was 57%. So the place where their standards can actually make a difference is going to be with staff. And the way the setup is right now, like say the Senate Secretary handles all the support staff of the Senate, but each and every one of the members of the Senate are the employer of their staff. So you have to have some sort of system where it crosses all that level. And then on top of everything else, you have to have the actual legislators committed to enforcing it.
As we wrap up, I want to ask you, what kind of response have you gotten from your readers? And I mean, a lot of your readers are lawmakers too. What are they telling you about the fact that you guys are covering this issue right now?
I mean, we've had an incredible amount of interest in addressing this issue. I mean, the day after our story published, we had both the Speaker's office and the Lieutenant Governor's office call for reviews of how sexual harassment is handled at the Capitol. We, of course, have had, other people continuing to reach out to us to want to share their experiences. I think the important thing is just going to be moving forward to continue to watch and, make sure that this is something that keeps its momentum and, keeps people's attention on it.
Thank you very much for covering this very important topic. I know that a lot of people will be interested to see where this goes ahead of the next legislative session.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And thank you for all the perspective that you brought too.
Thank you.
All right. He's known as the tweeting judge on the Texas Supreme Court. Now the president nominated him for a federal court, but some of his old tweets could cause a problem. A KXAN investigation leads state lawmakers to look over your concerns over text tag bills. How the people in power are responding to our questions now. Governor Greg Abbott is starting to pick the people he'll endorse in the 2018 election. One choice is drawing attention.
We need leaders in Austin who will join me to build an even better future for Texas. That's why I am so proud to support Susanna Docupil for State Representative of House District 134 in Houston, Texas.
Right now, District 134 is held by Republican Sarah Davis. She butted heads with the governor last summer because he did not include things like ethics reform on the special session call. Docupil is the first primary challenger to an incumbent that Abbott has endorsed. A KXAN investigation leads state lawmakers to look over your concerns over text tag bills. How the people in power are responding to our questions now.
I don't deride, Senator. I don't demean. I don't deride. I don't disparage.
Old tweets put a Texas judge on the hot seat in Washington. How the man known as the tweeting judge is responding to critics of his social media presence. Welcome back. A KXAN investigation has sparked state lawmakers to look over your concerns over text tag bills. Our team found more than 2.2 million text tag accounts have gone to collections since this year alone. The Texas Department of Transportation has maintained there's nothing wrong and people just don't want to pay up. But for the first time, our Brittany Glass questioned the head of the agency about your concerns.
Remember, we received hundreds of bills from viewers in recent weeks that we took straight to the top of TxDOT for answers. Today, the agency's executive director tells us they've reviewed those bills, and the reason customers are surprised by sudden collections letters, fees they didn't even know were adding up, is because he says the customers didn't have their correct address listed, meaning the bills went to the wrong address.
Because we did not have that information available to us.
Why was the collections agency able to identify their new address, but TxDOT was not?
Yeah, they have different methods available to them.
TxDOT Executive Director James Bass said that was the case with more than a quarter of the bills we handed over. The system, he says, worked the way it was meant to nearly every time, and for the few when it didn't, TxDOT is trying to help.
And we're going to work with customers to address and resolve any issues they may have.
But the issue isn't always listing the wrong address. Some of the biggest bills we've seen The address was correct on the toll bill and the collections letter, like this Pflugerville woman's. Still, she says customer service was unable to explain why a $730 toll charge somehow racked up more than $11,000 in late fees. And there are plenty of complaints that have nothing to do with an address. Like this customer who tells us he has a credit card on file, but after receiving his bill, he looked and it hasn't been charged since June. Or this woman who says the toll reader inexplicably could not read her text tag on a few occasions.
We've assumed.
It was clear during the first Senate Transportation Committee hearing since our investigation aired, when it comes to Texans' money, lawmakers want more transparency from Bass and his agency.
I went through 3 tolls, but by the time I paid my bill, it was, $45 instead of $4.
Senator Lois Kolkhorst told us she wasn't surprised to hear more than 2 million text tag accounts have been sent to collections this year.
And I am putting pressure on you because we can't have a lot of mistakes.
Many of them, she's learned, are her own Central Texas constituents.
Toll roads could almost become like a new utility bill. I'm worried about the working citizen that has a new utility bill every month that is taking away from their disposable income, which funds and fuels our economy and their way of life.
The executive director did tell us since TxDOT believes one of the big problems was bills going to the wrong addresses, the agency will soon provide an option for customers to provide their email address. So hopefully that will prevent future frustrations and make the process a whole lot easier. Reporting at the Capitol, Brittany Glass, back to you.
Thank you, Brittany. The Texas Department of Transportation will drop a financing idea for toll projects after state leaders expressed big concerns. The idea was an accounting trick. Voter-approved money would only be used for main lanes. Taxes and federal loans would pay for toll lanes on the same roads. The change comes after Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick asked TxDOT to explain its new plan for toll roads. He said he wanted to know after lawmakers worked hard to make sure TxDOT had funding to avoid building more toll roads, why plans for new road projects still involved toll lanes. Patrick also sent a letter to the TxDOT commissioner calling for a plan for Texas roads without toll lanes. The agency now says it will drop tolls from long-term plans. The Texas judge, known for his online personality, faced tough criticism in Washington over things he's posted on social media. Don Willett is known as the tweeting judge. The Texas Supreme Court justice has made thousands of posts, many of them humorous. Some have even gone viral. Earlier this year, President Trump nominated Willett for a spot on the federal Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. This week, Willett faced a Senate Judiciary panel considering his nomination. He took criticism over tweeting, "Go away, A-Rod," along with a story about a transgender high school student who made a girls' softball team. Here's the exchange with Democrat Al Franken.
Do you think it demonstrates good judgment for a man in his, late 40s, a sitting Supreme Court justice, to publicly demean and humiliate a 17-year-old girl on Twitter?
Senator Franken, I believe that every child is a gift. Every child is a blessing. No one is due disparagement. I would never disparage or demean anyone. As I mentioned earlier,
well, wait a
the
minute.
Timing of that, the timing of that tweet was right after Alex Rodriguez dropped his lawsuit against Major League Baseball. He was going to accept a year-long suspension from baseball. It happened exactly when that tweet went out. It was an A-Rod tweet, not a transgender tweet. And I know you would have.
Why did you post this along with it? Or why did you?
I think it was a.
Why did it accompany this?
I think it was
article?
A ham-handed attempt at levity and at comedy. And I know yours, in your experience, your comedy never falls flat, but mine does.
Later in the hearing, Republican Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana also criticized Willett for his tweets. The senator told Willett he should take his wife's advice and stop posting on social media. Willett said he would think about it. Ironically, just a day after his exchange with Willett, Senator Franken found himself having to explain his own attempt at humor. The Minnesota senator now faces an ethics probe after he was accused of forcibly kissing and groping a woman on a USO tour more than a decade ago. Franken apologized and said he was trying to make a joke that clearly was not funny. The senator said he will cooperate with the ethics probe.
We'll be able to save lives in the future by stopping people like this Sutherland Springs shooter from getting a legal weapon in the first place.
A Texas senator works to win support for a plan to keep guns away from people who should not have them. How he's reaching across the aisle in Washington to make it happen. Texas Senator John Cornyn is leading a bipartisan effort to close loopholes in the federal background check system after the deadly church shootings in Sutherland Springs. Authorities say the gunman had a criminal history and should not have been able to buy guns, but he was still able to buy 4 guns in the last 4 years. KXAN Washington correspondent Anna Wiernicki has the story.
I think there's a bipartisan willingness in this chamber.
Texas Republican Senator John Cornyn and Connecticut Democrat Chris Murphy say they've reached a rare bipartisan agreement to fix the federal background check system.
Up until today, Republicans weren't even willing to do this.
Senator Murphy says he is shocked the 4 Republicans were willing to negotiate.
But the fact that we have 4 Republicans on this bill, a couple of them really conservative NRA allies, it tells me that this has a better chance of passing than anything else that I've come across.
The bill penalizes federal agencies who fail to report criminal records to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System and encourages states to improve their reporting.
States that don't comply with the background check system are going to lose out on millions of dollars from the federal government.
Senator Cornyn says the bill uses money as an incentive for states and federal agencies to comply.
My hope is through grants and other financial incentives, we can get even better compliance to upload mental health history, criminal conviction history, including domestic violence, all of which are potentially disqualifying for somebody to purchase a firearm.
The goal is to prevent mass shootings like in Sutherland Springs, Charleston, and Blacksburg.
We'll be able to save lives in the future by stopping people like this Sutherland Springs shooter from getting a legal weapon in the first place.
Cornyn says he is confident with the 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans currently on board that this legislation will pass the Senate. In Washington, I'm Anna Wiernicki.
This is the 3rd attempt since 1995 to fix the background check reporting system. Cornyn said previous efforts created rules but few consequences for agencies and states that don't properly report. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. Stay tuned for Meet the Press coming up at 9. I'm Josh Hinkle. Have a great day.